session of 2025, and we've got Henry, and the topic that he's going to present is on learning English with TV series. So I think I'm just going to hand it over to Henry. And basically, if it's the first time that you are joining us for the You're the Expert session, it's a session where one of our members present for approximately 15 minutes. And then after that 15-minute presentation, we usually just open the floor for everyone to just discuss on the contents Henry just presented and share your thoughts. And just like a chance for you to meet other members like in real time. And that's the whole point of this event. So Henry, would you want to share your screen and just start your presentation?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. Just give me an instant.
Yeah.
Do you actually see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Wonderful.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yep.
Is that big enough for everybody, or do you want me to put it full screen?
Can you put your presentation? Can you? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
It's
wonderful.
Perfect now.
Well,
yeah.
I'm so happy to be with all of you. My name is Henry Roux de Bézieux. I'm from a business called Victoria's English in the south of France. We used to be a large network of language schools. And then after COVID, we downsized radically because the market just, fell through. We're still a large exam center. We're probably the first exam center in France. And we have a hobby, which is learning English with TV series. Now, it's not only a hobby, it just so happens that 3 of the key members of our staff all learned at least one language with TV series. And so we have, like, I learned German with TV series, not English. But we all found that this approach was just so wonderful and so great that we started wondering, why are we not offering it to our students? So over the last year and a bit, we've been doing a number of experiments. We've been coaching a number of people to do it. We interviewed a number of people who had spontaneously learned a language with series. And I'd like to give you a short presentation about how it works and why we're such believers in the approach. The first thing you need to understand is we work with adults. We're in the field of adult education. And when you work with adults in France, they've been through anything from 5 to 7 to 10 years of English lessons at school, in college, at university. And the first thing they tell you is basically they're fed up with English. Like, if they're coming to a language school, it's because they feel they have to. It's because their boss has told them, if you speak English, I can promote you. It's because the university has told them you won't get your diploma unless you have such and such a score with a TOEIC exam or a linguist skill or God knows what. But basically, they can't speak. They're bored stiff as soon as you discuss something like could and would, because they've had it about 20 times at school before. They have deep-seated feelings of being inadequate. And their basic question is, why was my neighbor successful in English and I wasn't? Now, this is not a French phenomenon in France. Our rough estimate is about anywhere from 60 to 80% of youngsters graduating from university have some degree of trouble with their English and are not satisfied with their level. So we delved into that phenomenon and started wondering, if it's such a widespread phenomenon, it has to have a structure, it has to have a system to it. And we started questioning our students, and they come up with some really wonderful things, insights, like when they go to a traditional English class, they end up never being able to learn their way. So this teacher is offering some sort of a standard, I hope Cambridge approved way of learning, but it's never their specific way. They can never do things at their own speed. Now, I have a little anecdote with this. We were coaching somebody last week, and she asked the coach, can you please remind me what's the difference between could and would? So the first thing the coach had to do was not be a teacher. So he said, no, won't tell you. Not my job. You have to look it up. So she Googled could and would grammar, and about, I think, 300 million pages come up when you type those 3 words. So she found a really nice one, and she started reading it out loud and making notes on her notebook. And she got so absorbed that the coach didn't say anything, didn't actually open his mouth for the next 28 minutes. But she was so into it. And after 28 minutes, she looked up, made eye contact, and said, "This is fascinating. Why was I never taught any of that at school?" Now, that was very amusing, because if you speak to any teacher in the French school system, they tell you could and would is really one of the staple elements of any curriculum. But she did take 28 minutes over it. So she was doing things in her own way and at her own speed. Typically, students tell us they are not really interested in the materials that are presented to them, and it's obviously difficult to interest very diverse people with the same materials. And eventually, they go into various cycles of discouragement. Some end up saying things like, after a few years, we would just sit at the bottom of the class, we would watch the teacher do his number, and we would just feel not concerned at all. So the analogy we came up for this is it's like you have all the students, they're sitting in this wonderful restaurant and there's an all-you-can-eat buffet. And the all-you-can-eat buffets nowadays, English is everywhere. YouTube is, 95% in English. All the websites they go to, they're almost all in English. But when they go to English class, the first thing the teacher says, no, don't take your plate, don't stand up, don't go and make your own choices, don't go and make your own experiments. I'm the one who's going to take all your plates, I'm going to put something into your plate, and you have to eat, all of you at the same time, at the same speed, and only what I say you should be eating. And this obviously doesn't go down very well with current audiences. So why did we get to be so enthusiastic about this approach? And I think the first reason was, as we had booths in trade fairs and language fairs and fairs for students to choose where they were going to study, and we would spend days and days and days testing people's English levels. So we'd have a little chat with them, and once in a blue moon, we'd meet one that we tested was a C1 or C2 level, spoke with a great pronunciation, great accent, and we'd ask them how they'd learned English. And they hadn't spent a year in England, they hadn't been to language courses, they hadn't enrolled in any of the fancy language schools. They would just say, well, as if it was obvious, I learned with TV series. That's actually how we started our project. And now, one interesting thing was all these people spoke with a good accent. They were not speaking with a French accent, you understand me? And now it's rather rare in France that people bother to speak with a decent accent. So we thought there must be something happening here, that this is really helping them pronounce English in an interesting way. The second thing we realize is once people get the knack of it, they tend to self-motivate all the way to B2 and C1. Then they eventually do a Cambridge exam or a TOEIC or whatever, and the motivation peters out, which is natural because they got to where they were, and that's all they really wanted. We thought it was a very cost and time effective approach for us as an institution and for our students, because they can get a lot more value for a much lower price, and we can get a lot more value. Even though we might charge less, it's much less effort for our staff and for our teachers. I think one of the most important things is how proud all these people are when they start learning things their way. That was quite a surprise. They stop resenting English classes. They actually start finding what they're doing is interesting, just only because they're the ones doing it. I mean, it's the same English language. And we also noticed it's a difficult change for educators. Now, I'm deliberately not using the word teachers, because educators have to move away from their traditional teaching roles and into coaching roles, which might not be easy after 10 or 20 years of practice as a teacher. The question you might be asking now is, does it work at all? Well, I'd say mostly yes. It's backed by plenty of fascinating research from the French CNRS, which is a large French research institution. They've been actually conducting research on this approach for the last 30 years. So yes, it does have a large corpus of research that shows it's valid, that shows it's interesting, that shows the results are better than anything else ever produced in the French educational system. I'd say it really gets students out of their ruts. I mean, all these disgruntled adults that come to us, once they get the gist of it, that they're going to be able to watch the series they love. They're going to be able to do things their way. They're going to start doing things that make sense to them. It really jerks them out of their, failure with English kind of stories. Two reservations. We have no experience with children. So if you do, I'll be glad to hear you on that later. Second thing is with people that are, in big life trouble. We had a person we coached recently with lots of personal worries, and that person was just not in a state to, didn't have enough agency, was not in a state that they could self-direct usefully. So the approach didn't work with that person, but on the other hand, I think a standard English class wouldn't have worked either. They were just elsewhere in their minds. Last and not least, in does it work? I'd like to say it's a disruptive approach. Now, I think Eve and I are the only two French people here, but the last time we presented this was to a union of university language teachers, and they were all up in arms against us. I mean, you're taking our jobs away. You're taking the whole foundation of how universities should work away. Yeah, this is not the way to do things. We will never adopt this, whatever the merits are. We don't even want to hear about it any other time. So in any case, it was an interesting reaction. We knew we'd hit a nerve. I mean, just think of it. 60 to 80% of your students are not achieving the way they should be. So we had hit a nerve, but it's obviously a disruptive approach, and we don't expect quick adoption. Who's this for? Well, we have experienced it with people from about 15, 70 years old. It works very well with individuals. It works even better with small groups, 2, 3, 4 people. It does take people that can self-organize to a certain degree. And we're aware of the fact that a lot of youngsters have, they've been kind of potty trained to be passive and listen to their teachers for now 5, 10, 15 years. And once they get to a certain age, they think the whole thing about schooling is just to recline at the back of the class and let the teacher do his number. So these people are the people that are going to have the biggest trouble moving into a self-directed program, but they're probably the ones who will eventually enjoy it most. This type of program works especially well with people that have a low threshold for boredom and that don't take to academia too well. So on the right-hand side of this screen, this is a projected new cover. It's not the current cover of our French book, but we're changing the cover. And it says, "English, my nightmare." And it has a few quotes from some of students that said, "I'm sick of English. What again would and could? I feel blocked when speaking. I understand the stuff, but I just can't produce a sentence. I've been learning it for 10 years already. I feel so bad at it, but I have to. Why me?" And down at the bottom of the cover, you can see there's a little thing we took from Netflix of, the little line you have at the bottom of a TV series. So how does it work is basically one needs to, it's not spontaneous with most people. Like all teachers in the French educational system tell their students, do watch your series in English. So the students do this once or twice in English with English subtitles. and they just don't understand the episodes. And then they watch them in English with French subtitles, and their eyes are just glued to the French subtitles. So basically, that's all they do. And they don't spontaneously develop an efficient way of doing things. So we have to bring about the how to, and this is through coaching. So we'll walk people through a number of steps that they learn how to juggle with subtitles. They learn how to check out on vocabulary. They learn how to practice speaking skills with things like reading the script out loud or play acting if they're a small group. You can add all the acting skills into there. People love that. We get them to practice writing skills, which is also a great way of kind of slowly putting in, sentence creation in there. You can get them to write the next episode of a series they are looking at. You can get them to write a review of the episode they just watched, etc., etc. So our book presents about 15 key ways people can interact with the TV series, and then another 30 options to these 30 key ways. So there's a lot of material out there of how things can be done. But the most important skill is really self-directing. So students have to progressively learn how to cut the tasks out from themselves, decide what's important for them, decide what series they want to watch, decide whether they want to watch an episode once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, decide what grammatical structures they want to learn, decide how they want to practice speaking, etc., etc. So this will take a little time for most people, but they've already all done it when you think of it when they were toddlers. They didn't have a teacher telling them what present perfect is, but they just learned it. So we go from the assumption that people will self-direct if they're given the chance to do it. They have already self-directed, and that's a kind of an innate human capacity. From a teacher's perspective, it means reorganizing your class in a very, very fundamental way. If you're like in the school system, if you're in a private language school, it's a lot easier, and you're probably dealing with small groups or individuals, which makes things consistently easier. It's absolutely CFR aligned, because if you actually read the original 30 or 45 pages of what the CFR is, it includes all those kinds of skills that the kids will develop with TV series. And it will absolutely not work if educators stick to traditional teacher roles. So if you have the educators saying, students, please sit down. Students, today we're going to study this. Today we're going to watch this series. And today our particular focus is going to be on this grammar point. Well, that's going to put all your students right back into their passive mode, which they probably have years and years of experience in, and they will never get to the stage that they learn how to self-direct and take ownership for their English. So I think I've really addressed all the benefits already. We have one last slide about them here. In France, being an English teacher is more or less of a dead end for lots of people. So for youngsters coming over from Britain, for instance, it's a great opportunity to land yourself a job rather fast, meet French people, integrate into the country. But then if you remain an English teacher to the age of 40, you're doing the same things again and again. You're paid a lot less well than you used to be 20 years ago because there's a lot more competition. And you suddenly realize your skills as an English teacher are not very transferable, and it's not very easy for you to go and do something else. So you're kind of stuck. And you're stuck in a job that has low pay and requires you to give out a lot of yourself, be generous, spend a lot of time, and that is eventually linked to a lot of teacher fatigue. So we think it's a great opportunity for teachers to transition to something which is a lot more transferable, because coaching skills are very much more transferable. And once you know how they work, you could do almost the same thing for mathematics or chemistry. It also provides a much more relaxing way to teach English with a lot less effort from educators. We think there's a real stake with institutions that in France are not really willing to listen to this message yet, but it will happen eventually. You have to address these high failure rates. I've had contacts with, bigwigs in the ministry, and they do quite openly recognize that the success of the French education system with English is not there, and that it hasn't been there for the last 50 years. And they'd quite candidly say, we're not good at English. But nothing's ever been done about it, which, from my point of view as a citizen, I find a real shame. In any case, institutions will probably need to transition eventually into the 21st century, into this new world. And one of the characteristics of the new world is that English is everywhere. So the kids are in front of this all-you-can-eat buffet all day long, on the one hand, and they have shorter and shorter attention spans and, short tempers and short levels of patience. And so they will probably not tolerate for many decades more to be just passive recipients of the teacher's knowledge. So I think education has been working for the last 150 years on more or less the same framework. And it's probably time with new technologies and new pedagogical approaches to make a few key changes to what it has been for the last 150 years. So I hope I haven't bored you too much. That's the end of my talk. Thanks for listening up to now. You have our email here if you ever want to strike up a correspondence with us. And Eve, my colleague, and I will be happy to take any questions or comments you would like to send us.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you for sharing.
Henry.
It's very like an innovative way of thinking how to like how learners can learn English, and I believe like all our members here today will have some thoughts on it. But first, I would like to open the floor to any questions for Henry. Is there like any part of the presentation that anyone has some questions for Henry and Ina? Yeah. I think Manuela, I saw Manuela's hand first, and we'll get to you later, Jason.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I was trying to raise my hand, but it's not working, sorry. I would like to know what kind of series of TV shows they prefer. Do they have a preference for comedies, drama, crimes? I don't know. Or does it depend? Does it vary from one group of age, from kids to teenagers, adults, and adults? What are the preferences?
Well, you would be, the whole range, like Netflix, Disney Plus, they will produce a whole range of series, and the whole range is represented by our clients. Some of them do some rather goofy things, like one kid, 17-year-old kid, loves Japanese mangas, but his requirement was to learn German. And he started watching Japanese mangas dubbed in German with German subtitles. Now, technically, he was learning German, but obviously this was not authentic and it was not in the culture. It was quite interesting that one day I was coaching him and we did go to a real authentic German series with German subtitles. And he realized, A, that the culture was totally different and not Japanese at all. And B, that they actually speak very differently, because when Japanese was translated into German, they always made proper sentences with the subject, a verb, all the rest. But when the Germans, this was set in Berlin and they speak colloquial German, a lot of the sentences are completely truncated. They use slang words, and it was almost an entirely different language he was learning. So once he realized that, he actually stopped watching the Japanese and he switched over to German, authentic German series. But no, people like comedies, they like drama, they like, you name it, somebody likes it.
Okay, sorry, one more question, if you don't mind. Have you tried with video games or perhaps movies or any other kind of?
I haven't tried with movies because movies tend to be a bit too long. We actually, especially with beginners, we prefer sitcoms because the episodes are really short. Some of our learners have switched from series. Some of the more intellectual or older folks prefer learning with books. So we have a learner who recently said, well, I'm a bit tired of watching series, and she went to an English library in Paris and bought herself a number of English books, and she's reading them right now. But it works fine with books. She's just providing the pictures in her mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think, Jason, do you still have a question?
Yeah, well, I don't. Well, first off, Henry, great presentation. It's great to meet you. It's great to see you, colleagues. No, I agree with Henry on the videos. I improved my Spanish speaking with vocabulary. I'm not familiar with French, the French language or the terms, but I know that I improved my Spanish while my wife, we watch the shows in Spanish, and I put translation in English. So I'm listening to Spanish and I'm able to translate certain words and phrases. It's really helpful. What I try to do is, like Henry mentioned, I watch a lot of series and I offer these series to my students to watch so they can improve a little bit of their vocabulary. I believe that also the students need to be autonomous and wanting to learn. I understand why maybe in the European countries, English is difficult for them because I think it's an obligation because you guys are surrounded by English speaking countries like, England, British. So, France, Italians have that obligation to learn. Where I'm from South America. So I'm surrounded by Spanish speaking countries. So a lot of my students feel not the need to improve as much in English because they can go to other countries, but there's no English speaking countries. You have to go abroad to European countries, or they have to go to the United States. So I feel the obligation for French students or any other foreign students wanting to learn English, it could be difficult. Also, in the European countries, I believe that you guys have, I don't know, a certain, being intelligible, I think is important to teach the students, knowing that, we are based, well, in the European countries, or what I read, received pronunciation is the base, speech that people try to, that's their main goal. That's their main goal. And maybe they feel that pressure. So teaching maybe giving the students that, speaking is not perfect. And the only thing important is to get the message across would be important. But I don't know how it is out there abroad. But excellent, Henry, and great presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's all.
I got a question from Harry. I was wondering if you're using American English or British English TV series with your students.
Well,
or both.
It's not our decision, really. Students usually they enjoy a certain series that they've already seen at least part of in French. And the series just happens to be Hollywood or British or whatever.
Okay.
It used to be considered a major point a while ago, but I don't think people care so much now.
Okay, thank you.
Ina?
Yeah. I would like to say thank you, first of all, for such an interesting topic. And I would like to say that I use videos very often during my lessons. And the most interesting thing for me is how to work with videos. Do you give vocabulary before watching? Maybe what kind of tasks do you have for your students? Maybe pre-watching tasks, after watching task questions, filling the gaps. How do you work with pronunciation? Do you catch the necessary or interesting expressions or something like that? Collocations, how do you work? What kind of tasks do you use?
Well, I'm going to disappoint you because we basically do not set any tasks. We do not provide any previous vocabulary, and we do not provide any exercises afterwards. Our job as coaches is to get people to self-direct and choose their own challenges. So if they're just being passive, we might challenge them. And you could say this is a type of way of providing a task. Like one day I was coaching somebody recently and I said, she'd got to episode 4 of a series. And I said, well, I suggest the next thing we do, and this was a real challenge for her, is you're going to tell me what episode 5, which you haven't yet watched, might look like. So she kind of, gasped because she thought this was a very high-level challenge, but she was up to it. And she spent about half an hour telling me what the next episode, if she was to design the next episode, what it was to be like. So it was all in English. She was using great grammar. She was using a lot of vocabulary from the series, and that had the effect of practicing a lot of things she was learning. But we wouldn't, say, please learn this word or please focus on this type of grammar either before or afterwards, because we want students to develop this ability to learn by themselves. Because as soon as they get that, they start firing off like rockets all the way. And series is basically something that they can watch at home. And so they can eventually do a lot more English once they understand how it works.
Okay.
Sorry, I think I might be disappointing you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is, I would like to ask you one more question. Do you use videos during the lesson, or it's like a homework?
Well, for legal purposes in France, it's very complicated to use videos during the lesson because of copyright issues. So, and we're not in a school context, we're further education. So we have people watch videos outside the coaching sessions we have with them, and then we go into coaching mode.
There's such a difference between, yeah, it's very interesting. It's amazing. We have a lot of tasks when we use videos. We have a lot of tasks for our students in Ukraine, so they should do a lot of things pre-watching tasks, after watching. So it is amazing that you.
We have a checklist in the book we wrote. We have a checklist on like 45 different tasks that they could do, but we don't want to be the ones setting the tasks. I mean, if they had trouble understanding, there's a few tasks that are going to help them understand better, and they can self-orient towards those tasks. If understanding is a sail-through, but speaking is still difficult, well, then there's a whole range of tasks they can do to practice speaking, etc., etc., etc. But once, it's a very different educational philosophy. Once they start assessing what their own need is, we really want them to develop this capacity that they assess what their own need is, and they spontaneously go to a type of activity that they can then really design by themselves. One of the exercises even has, they make it like if they're in a group of 3, any one of them can make the stopgap. You can find the scripts to all the series online. They can just blank out certain words for each other and they can do their own stopgap thing. But the other one's doing it, which makes a whole lot of difference in the whole atmosphere of the class.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So following up on that question, I was just thinking, do you teach the students how to do self-learning, or are they also expected to know how to self-learn?
No, we don't ever expect people to know how to self-learn. We think infants, when they learn their first language, and there's been quite a lot of research, they're very good at self-directing, fortunately. So it is quite of an innate capacity, but then the school system kind of, educates this out of people, that they lose the faculty because they're never asked to use it. And they're actually actively discouraged from using it. When people go into self-learning mode at school, it's usually up to some sort of mischief or, not complying with what the teacher wants. And so, I mean, I know because I was very good at it at school. So I was in constant trouble because of trying to self-learn in an environment that was not designed for it. So yeah, we always go from the principle that it has to be taught. And this is one of the essential roles that teachers should carry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Manuela?
Yes, thank you. I would like to make some comments about what Aina was asking Henry's reply, because Henry's presentation was really great, and the presentation of the context and the analysis of the reasons of the situation, what they are going through, is great, and I feel identified with you, Henry, because here in Brazil we go through the same situation. They perhaps that much, not to that extent, but I don't know if it is because of a generation issue or what, but the teenagers especially, they don't want to be imposed. They want to do things their way, to study what it's interesting for them. So at my school, which is part of a chain, a private English school, we have changed the methodology, and now we have included a your choice section. And we used to do, as I was asking, oh, do you pre-teach? Do you set a pre-task? And we used to do that. But again, it becomes boring. There is no surprise factor. And I know, and if they don't like what they are going to see next, they just lose interest. And so when we give them options, and it is like a surprise, oh, I have the control. So I guess that Henry is going that way, like giving this self-autonomy. And what we do is, after what they have chosen, okay, then we work on the post task, we could say, but also kind of guided by them, not by the teacher. Or we make them believe that they are guiding us. But that's the point. When they feel they have the control of their own learning, it is more engaging for them. So thank you so much, Henry.
Yeah, no, I think that's a key point. I mean, I know as a person, I like being minimum in control. I'm not saying I'm a control freak, but, little control does no harm. And I think all our students appreciate that too.
Yeah. Marissa?
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, Henry, thank you for your great presentation, a very creative method, but I have one question. I don't know if I have misunderstood you, but you say they write essays sometimes about the series. Where and when have they learned how to write an essay or acquire the structures, or they do it by their own? So they have to research. I don't know if I'm clear in my question, Henry.
I'm not sure I entirely understood the question, sorry.
Okay. You say that sometimes after seeing the series, if I haven't misunderstood, students write essays about the episodes or so on, no? So my question is, there is a structure to write essays with certain fixed structures, guidelines. So how do they acquire these? They have learned it before, they learn it on their own.
Well, once, they've had a substantial practice in self-directing, learning directly from materials, I'll give you an example from a situation that we know quite well, is if they're required, for instance, to do a TOEIC 4 skills or a Cambridge exam that includes essay writing. And if, you know, they'll go through the annals, they'll go through practice tests, they'll go through, they like any other kid. And then if there's something they don't know, and they'll realize that they don't know it, and they'll research it and they'll work on it.
That's okay. So they do it on their own. That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
essentially, you know, if they need somebody to talk to, there's somebody in our school to talk to. But essentially, what we like is they become capable of doing it on their own.
Thank you, and great presentation. Thank you for sharing.
Do we have any more questions or any final thoughts about this topic? No? Okay. Well, if not, thank you so much again, Henry. It's such a great Paul. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And really appreciate Henry's wonderful presentation. And actually, right now, I'm going to teach my students how to practice their oral English. But actually, before that, I tried to teach them with very short movies about American movies to teach them imitate their pronunciation. But I would like to ask you, today you introduced the TV series, but how to learn by the TV series? I mean, how many episodes do the students have to watch, and how do you divide the episode to teach the students? And the other question is that how about the time and how long will you teach the TV series for the students, the whole term, school term, and how to assign the students to learn it? Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of questions.
Another question.
First of all, we have no experience.
Thank you very much.
Paul, I'm sorry, we have no experience in school systems because we only do adult education as private language schools. But I'm sure, you know, we'd love one day to work with an educational system and help design all the answers to the questions you're asking. And now with adults, basically, our experience is once they're on track, once they've had something like 20 hours of coaching, which is, you know, quite a bit, they will basically then move on to B2 or C1 autonomously. And I'm not saying, you know, most of them will appreciate to have their once monthly kind of appointment with their coach, but they're not going to require us to be holding their hand every day or giving them 4 hours of tuition a week, which would be typical in a traditional curriculum. So basically, they'll be using a lot less teacher time and be doing a lot more by themselves, and they will get all the way to B2 or C1.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Marissa, did you have a final question that you wanted to ask? Because you had your hand. Okay. Right? Okay.
No, she hasn't.
Okay.
I've already taken.
Yeah. Okay. So then I guess we'll call it a day. What we'll do afterwards is, if Henry, you could I'll reach out to you afterwards, and then maybe we'll put the deck also up in the community in the discussion area. And if you have further thoughts on this concept of learning English with TV series, you can continue discussion there. And we'll also try to send the recording through our newsletter next week. And then keep posted for the next session coming up in April. We will notify you guys once it's all set. So thank you all for your time today. And thank you once again, Henry, for such a great presentation. Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye. Bye.